Thank you very much. I have been asked to deliver this speech in English. In order for you to understand, I hope I will do three things. First of all, I would speak English as slowly as possible. Second thing, I would like to make sure that when we encounter any important terms, I will translate them into Chinese with your help. The third, I hope at any moment you can interrupt me if you have questions or misunderstandings or anything, you can interrupt me. I hope this class will be the beginning for me to deliver future speeches in English. Any difficulties? So far, so good. Thank you. Today's topic is origins of Hebrew faith. This is actually one of the three series I would like to deliver in this university. When we talk about Hebrew faith today, next year I would like to talk about original Christianity and original Islam. I hope you can have new understanding of those new faiths we are not familiar with. First of all, I have to interpret or explain different terms for the same peoples. We encounter all different terms, sometimes Hebrews, sometimes Jews, sometimes Israelis, sometimes Israelites. So these four terms actually are referring to the same people, but with different reasons, sometimes with different purposes. First of all, Hebrews. This means the original people. We call them Jews today, because Jews had a later origin. This is why before the Jews appears to be an ethnic group in history, or Israelis as an ethnic group in history, we call original people based on their language, Hebrew language, then Hebrews. This is why I use the term called Hebrew faith. Hebrew is a term scholars are using for teaching purpose, for writing purpose. Not average Jew knows this term. So some Jewish people who might be even very intelligent do not know they are Hebrews. I emphasize, this is a term used by the scholars to describe history in a more accurate fashion. Jews is the most popular term. However, the originally term is from the Roman use. It means after the Romans encountered the Jews, conquered the Middle East, they call this group of people Jewish people or Jews, based on their understanding of the kingdom of Judah. Judah. Heard of it? What's the meaning of Judah? Original meaning Judah, the son of God. Okay? Son of God. So Jews in around 700, 600, 500 had a kingdom of their own called the kingdom of Judah. From this term, they call themselves Jews. After the conquest by the Romans, Romans called them Jews. This is the origin of Jewish, Jews. Today, this is the most popularly used term. Israelis. Certainly, this is the citizens of modern state of Israel. So, in most cases, when you read Israelis, means the citizens of modern state of Israel. However, why Israelis call them Israelis? Because they remembered their history. There was a period of time, probably from 1000 to 900, all the Hebrews lived in a kingdom, a unified kingdom. We will talk about it. That kingdom is called Unified Kingdom of Israel. So Israelis means citizens of modern state of Israel, but it has a historical roots in that unified kingdom of Israel. Finally, Israelites. This is a term with specific religious meaning. Those Orthodox Jews, throughout history, their dream is to reinstate a state of their own. This idea in history is called the Zionist. Have you ever encountered a Zionist? Zionist, Orthodox Jews with very strong religious faith. Their purpose on earth is to restore the old glory of unified Israel. Then they call themselves Israelites. In modern discourse, Israelites has specific religious meaning. So one term must be explained. Zionist. What's the meaning of Zionist? How Zionist is being translated into Chinese? Don't know. 犹太复国主义. Yutai Fuguozui, those who would like to restore the ancient glory, to reinstate or install a state of their own. In the religious sense, they call themselves Israelites. These are the differences of these two terms. Question. So far, do you understand? So far. Okay, let's move on into the major contents of today's class. I will divide today's class into two parts. One is about the history of the ancient Hebrews or later Jews. One is about the most important characteristics of the Hebrew faith or Jewish faith. This is a map of ancient Mesopotamia. The green parts is called Mesopotamian crescent. It means the fertile crescent. The concentration of very archaic civilizations in this part of Mesopotamia. Jews or ancient archaic Hebrews were part of Mesopotamian culture. Linguistically, they belong to a school called Semitic people, shared with Sumerians, Akkadians, Babylonians, the same linguistic roots, Semitic roots. Geographically, they share the same piece of land. That is a fertile crescent in Mesopotamia. Culturally, they are very closely linked to each other because they share the cultural heritage we will talk about very soon. Very unique aspect we might not be familiar with is the fact that Jews and Arabs were neighbors. You analyze today's conflict between Israel and Arab countries. That is the modern development. In the very archaic age, they lived in the crescent and Arabs living in the desert. By language, they are at least the cousins. This is why you read Hebrew Bible and the Islamic Quran carefully. They share the history and the culture very closely. The original home of the Hebrews was Ur. Okay? Ur, here. Ur. Few people know until the American war in Iraq. Ur, the picture was shown to the world. It means this is the original homeland of Hebrews or later Jews. This crescent is important because it approximately tells us the migration roads. about 1900 BCE, it is Abraham who led the Jews out of their original homeland, traveling more or less along the Mesopotamian crescent to Egypt. This is why Abraham is considered as the cultural ancestor of Jewish people or ancient archaic Hebrews. And then, very interestingly, same Abraham is also considered as the ancestors of Arabs. In Quran, Abraham is spelled as Ibrahim, same person. They are the Mesopotamian people, Semitic people. For a certain purpose or reasons, they migrated into other people's land. What are the reasons? Reason one, in the Bible or in the shared history, very clearly, the two rivers are violent. Flood is the shared story of many people living in the region. Another reason, Mesopotamian culture is very violent, full of wars and conquest, because different peoples even share with cultural and linguistic roots, all wanted to live in the most fertile land of the two river mouth region. Now, flood story is the most important story in Hebrew Bible. Where do we see the flood story? We also see the flood story in that Mesopotamia epic called the Epic of Gilgamesh. Have you ever heard of Epic of Gilgamesh? Huh? 怎么翻译的？吉尔加美什史诗。Now, what is the story? Story is about a Mesopotamian king, Gilgamesh. To protect his people, he defeated his enemy called Anknu. Later, they became very good friends. Together, they fight against other odds, natural and human enemies. In this process, Anknu died. In his suffering, Gilgamesh decided to find out whether or not human beings must die. What will happen after human beings' death? In finding the answers, he fight on earth and underground. After being exhausted, he concluded that human beings must die. Death is a fate. There is no way to escape. That is probably the conclusion of the Mesopotamian people to the question of death predicament. Death predicament, 死的两难境地。人真要死吗？死了会怎么样啊？人能不能永生啊？再生啊？这个问题 this question bothered almost all the peoples on earth. Because of the different answers, we see different religions emerging in the classic age. But you look at Epic of Gilgamesh, the Mesopotamian conclusion is comparatively negative, pessimistic. Man must die. This is probably also the answers of the Hebrews before they migrated into other parts of the world. So, when we look at the Epic of Gilgamesh, we should pay attention to the flood story as well as the unique Mesopotamian answer to the death predicament. Another important historical background is we have to mention Code Hammurabi. What is the translation? Hammurabi 法典. Why this is important and relevant to our understanding of the Jewish faith or Hebrew faith in the Archaic Age? The reason is, in Code Hammurabi, there is a phrase, eye for an eye. Are you familiar with? 以眼还眼. Sometimes we add tooth for a tooth. Okay? That is not the intellectual property of the Archaic Hebrews. That is shared value or idea of law of all Mesopotamians. But pay attention to eye for an eye. When it was put into the Code Hammurabi, the literary enforcement of law by eye for an eye is changed into a very abstract principle of justice. What do we mean by literary enforcement of eye for an eye? I harmed one of your eye, then you have the legal right to harm one of my eyes. But we know human violence does not know limit. Human violence escalates by its own logic. So, your purpose is to take the vengeance into your hands to harm my eye. However, the result, you kill me. In revenge, I kill more in your tribe or in your ethnic group, and then violence escalated. When Code Hammurabi was put into law code, you should pay attention to the fact that when you harm somebody, even kill somebody, more functional punishment is for you to pay a certain amount of money. This is why eye for an eye in Code Hammurabi is no longer being literally enforced, but turning itself to be a principle of justice, fairness, and law. But we human beings often emphasized literary enforcement instead of understand these words as the principle of fairness and justice. Do we Chinese have this kind of phrase? 中国人有没有同样的说法？啊，以牙还牙，以眼还眼，这是我们从人家那里翻译过来的。中国的翻杀人怎么样？杀人偿命，欠债还钱。欠债还钱好理解，怎么样理解杀人偿命啊？在我们的大众文化当中，杀人偿命仍然是对不对？非常普遍的一种认识。即便你是过失杀人，即便你是自卫杀人，我们老百姓仍然认为你应该付出你的生命作为惩罚。Remember, the same phrase in Chinese language can be understood either as the literary enforcement of law or as the principle of fairness and justice. In our civilized world today, we had better understand these terms 杀人偿命，借债还钱 as the principle of fairness instead of the warranty for us to take vengeance in our own hands. Go back to Code Hammurabi. Yeah? Why? We certainly see the connection of Code Hammurabi with the Jewish Bible. Then there encounter a term called land of milk and honey. 什么意思？牛奶和蜂蜜的土地。I want to make sure what's the meaning of land of milk and honey. while migrating ultimately into Egypt. On the way, ancient Hebrews must have lived in a piece of land they loved. They used the term of land of milk and honey to describe that past experience. They found that land suitable for them to live, but they gave up for the reason beyond their control. Certainly, because that land had been occupied by other peoples. That land was the land full of domestic wars among different peoples. This is why they didn't stay in that piece of land. They continued to migrate, and they continued to migrate into Egypt. Another issue is about monotheistic faith or polytheistic faith. It means you ask average Jews and average Christians. They believe during this first period of time of migration, Jews became monotheistic. What's the meaning of monotheistic? 一神论. Is that true? They say, yeah, Abraham said that those who believe are the descendants of Abraham. Those who believe in one God are the descendants of Abraham. So Abraham said, we all believe in one people, or one God. However, historical facts didn't say that. During this period of time, Jews or archaic Hebrews were like their fellow Mesopotamians, believing in many gods instead of one. Why dare I say that? Because at that time, the Hebrew Bible was not composed.